The first thing you hear in Edo is not the clang of swords, nor the call of a watchman shouting warnings through the fog. It is the sound of paper. Thin, shivering paper sliding across wooden rails, shoji doors pushed open to let the morning in. The air outside carries the smell of damp rice straw, charcoal ash, and the faintest hint of soy smoke drifting from the neighbor's kitchen. You are in the home of a low-ranking samurai, one of tens of thousands who, by the early 18th century, had never once drawn their swords in battle. His name is Sakuma Tadayori, a man of 37 years and an inheritance too small to inspire either envy or fear. He lives in a narrow residence near the edge of Edo, in a district not far from the Sumida River. The house is modest: 2 tatami rooms, a small kitchen, a veranda where a pot of chrysanthemums grows without much enthusiasm. He wakes before sunrise, not because duty calls him, but because habit does. For men like Sakuma, habit is the truest master. There is no battlefield, no glory, and no reason to rise early. Yet he does so every morning, as his father did, and his father before him. The room is still cold from the night. His wife Oharu is already awake, kneeling beside the brazier, coaxing the coals back to life. The soft crackle of fire and the rhythm of her breath fill the space. When Sakuma folds his bedding and stacks it neatly in the corner, she does not look up, but the corners of her mouth turn slightly. Acknowledgement enough. In the world of Edo's peace, gestures replace words. It has been over 100 years since Japan's last great civil war, and in that century of calm, the language of the samurai changed. The vocabulary of death was replaced with the grammar of etiquette. A nod, a pause, a folded sleeve, these became the new tools of expression. Sakuma eats his breakfast in silence: a bowl of barley rice, miso soup with radish, and 2 slices of pickled cucumber. The meal is simple, but deliberate. Even this quiet act has meaning. For the warrior class, restraint in food was a symbol of virtue. The absence of indulgence marked discipline, the lack of complaint signified loyalty. He finishes, wipes his hands, and takes up his katana and wakizashi. He wears them not as weapons, but as emblems of station. In a city of over 1 million souls, where even the humblest townsman might earn more coin than a retainer, the sword is a reminder that class still breathes, even if its lungs are weak. The walk to his post takes him across narrow alleys paved with crushed shells and gravel. He serves at the administrative office of the Hatamoto family, to whom his line has been bound for 3 generations. His duty is not to guard a lord or patrol a gate, but to record, to inscribe the daily expenditures of rice stipends and maintenance of warehouses. He writes in a careful hand, each character square and sober. If a brushstroke wavers, he scrapes it off with the edge of a shell and rewrites it, a small ritual of erasure. The sound of ink grinding, the slow exhale as he leans over the paper, this is his combat. Precision is his swordsmanship. Around mid-morning, his superior, a man named Takamura, enters. They exchange shallow bows, discuss grain shipments, and the day continues with the quiet pulse of bureaucracy. The walls are lined with shelves stacked in perfect uniformity, each ledger marked by a thin strip of mulberry paper bearing the year and season. None of these books will ever be read again, yet each must be perfect. Outside, Edo hums. Vendors shout the price of mackerel, children chase paper balls through alleys, and at the riverfront ferrymen call out for passengers. Inside, Sakuma writes. Every few moments he lifts his brush and watches the ink drip slowly back into the pot, like time itself returning to its source. By noon, the sun has lifted over the tiled rooftops. The office shutters are open to let in a dull light. A clerk across the room sneezes. No one looks up. The sneeze is as common as the scratch of a brush. Both belong to the soundscape of peace. At midday, he leaves for his meal. Bento boxes are unwrapped in silence. Rice, pickles, and the occasional salted plum. Conversations are limited to the weather, the health of an aging horse, or the rising cost of charcoal. Each topic, safe and circular, preserves the fragile balance of harmony. To speak of ambition, politics, or discontent would be dangerous. In Edo, stillness is safety. He returns home as the sky deepens into indigo. His wife has hung the day's laundry and folded it before sunset. Their son, a boy of 8, is tracing characters in the dust on the floorboards. Sakuma corrects his stroke with a quiet gesture. Again he says softly. The boy erases the mark and rewrites it. Dinner is as restrained as breakfast: rice, dried fish, and a turnip simmered in soy broth. They eat slowly, each bite counted. Afterward, Oharu lights the paper lanterns. The glow is faint, like breath against glass. Sakuma takes his katana, wipes the blade with oiled paper, and replaces it carefully in its sheath. He has never drawn it in anger. The blade is polished so often that its reflection feels more familiar than his own face. Before bed, he records the day's household expenses in a small notebook. 1 mon for rice, 2 for oil, 3 for charcoal. The act is neither exciting nor trivial. It is the arithmetic of endurance. Outside, the wind moves through the bamboo fence, making a soft rattling sound. The city is quiet except for the distant clack of night watchmen striking wooden blocks, a reminder that time, even in stillness, must be marked. Sakuma lies down, his eyes open to the dim ceiling. He thinks of his ancestors, men who once fought in the chaos of the Sengoku Wars, who carried banners into fire and blood. He wonders if their ghosts find his life shameful, or perhaps enviable. To live without war, is it peace, or merely waiting? The question drifts through the quiet house, unanswered. Outside, a paper door creaks, and the night folds back into silence. The following morning begins with the faint hum of rain. It is not the kind of rain that demands shelter or alarm. It is the slow, endless drizzle that soaks into the walls and softens every sound until the city seems to dissolve into mist. Sakuma Tadayori rises at the same hour as always. The room is darker today, the morning light is grey and filtered through the paper doors. The air smells faintly of damp wood and roasted barley. His wife Oharu has lit a small fire in the hearth. She hums a song from her childhood, one of those wordless tunes passed down through generations of women who have known the same quiet routines. Outside, the roof drips in a steady rhythm. Somewhere down the street, a rooster crows late, confused by the dimness. Edo, the largest city in the world, feels half asleep. The rain will not stop Sakuma from working. He takes up his umbrella, a large oiled paper canopy bound by bamboo, and steps out. His sandals make soft sounds against the wet stones. Around him, other samurai and clerks hurry to their posts, heads bowed against the drizzle. They are all dressed nearly alike, muted browns and greys, the fabric coarse but clean. Rank, in a time of peace, is measured less by wealth than by posture. By mid-morning, the office smells of ink and wet straw. The floors are slick from the comings and goings of men. Sakuma removes his sandals, bows and kneels at his station. The ledgers are waiting, thick, bound volumes of rice paper sheets that record the slow heartbeat of an empire at peace. He begins with the monthly tally of rice stipends. Each retainer of the Hatamoto family receives a portion measured not in money, but in koku, the amount of rice sufficient to feed one man for a year. The system is elegant in its simplicity and cruel in its rigidity. A man's worth is weighed in grain. For every bag distributed, Sakuma makes a mark. His brush moves in perfect repetition, vertical, horizontal, curve, lift. Hours pass without a word spoken. This is not idleness, it is precision. Every brushstroke is an act of devotion to order, to the invisible scaffolding of peace. Outside these walls, the city grows, merchants gain wealth, peasants move into towns, artisans multiply. But the samurai's world remains bound by ledgers and etiquette. Their armor rusts quietly in storerooms, their swords gleam in ceremonial polish. Their true weapon is obedience. Around midday, Sakuma is called into his superior's chamber. Takamura, the senior clerk, sits behind a low writing table. The light falls softly across his shaven head. His tone is polite, but weary. Tadayori, he says, you will be in charge of the quarterly inspection this season. The Lord wishes the warehouse accounts reviewed. Sakuma bows, as you command. The warehouse inspection is one of the few occasions when a man like him can leave the city. The journey will take him 3 days east, to the domain's rice granaries, vast, silent structures where the grain is measured, sealed, and left to sleep. It is not an adventure, but a pilgrimage to the foundation of Tokugawa peace, the wealth of rice. When he leaves Takamura's office, Sakuma feels a flicker of something that might be excitement, though he quickly suppresses it. Emotion, like poverty, is best hidden. Oharu spends her own days in quiet repetition. While Sakuma writes, she tends the household washing, mending and preparing the evening meal. Theirs is not a life of poverty, but neither is it one of comfort. The stipend is enough to maintain dignity, though only barely. Her daily ledger is the kitchen. Every grain of rice counted, every scrap of vegetable boiled into soup. Waste is a silent shame. On rainy days, she sits by the window, repairing garments with fine, nearly invisible stitches. Beside her, their son, little Ichinosuke, practices his calligraphy. She corrects him gently, guiding his hand. The ink thickens on the paper, forming characters that seem both ancient and fragile. The boy does not yet understand what it means to be samurai. He knows only that his father writes important things and bows to other men who write important things. The sword on the wall is beautiful, but heavy, forbidden to touch. He asks, "Mother, will father ever fight?" Oharu hesitates, then smiles softly. "Not in this lifetime, I hope." The rain taps against the paper doors. Ichinosuke returns to his practice, his tongue between his teeth in concentration. 2 days later, the rain ends. The city steams as the sun returns, glinting off tiled roofs. Sakuma prepares for travel. He carries a small pack, ink, brushes, blank paper, a ledger book, and a change of clothes. His sword, though rarely drawn, must accompany him by law. The road east of Edo is lined with willows and milestones. Travelers pass at a steady pace. Merchants, pilgrims, porters, and the occasional daimyo procession, moving like a slow, glittering river of lacquer and silk. Sakuma walks with even steps, neither hurried nor idle. His umbrella shades him from the glare. The air smells of horse dung and summer grass. He stops at a post station to rest. The innkeeper bows deeply, addressing him as Samurai-sama. Though Sakuma knows his attire and humble travel pack mark him as low-ranking, still, the title carries weight. Appearances are a form of armor. At dusk, he reaches the granary district, a quiet expanse of wooden storehouses raised on stone foundations, their walls sealed against rodents and humidity. The scent of rice is heavy in the air, earthy and faintly sweet. He lodges in a small hut near the warehouse office. His work will begin at sunrise. That night, he writes in his diary, "The air here is still. The granary gates are locked, and the watchman sleeps by the fire. The sound of insects is louder than the city itself. If peace has a sound, it must be this, the hum of unseen labor, the waiting of stored grain." Morning comes with a chorus of sparrows. Sakuma inspects the first warehouse with 2 assistants. The rice sacks are stacked in perfect order, their cords tied with careful knots. He takes notes, measures samples, and seals the storerooms again. The men work slowly, but without complaint. Each bag represents a small world, months of planting, harvesting, threshing, and drying. Behind every number in Sakuma's ledger lies a chain of unseen laborers. He thinks of them, peasants bending in fields, women carrying sheaves on their backs, children scaring crows away with wooden rattles. The samurai class, once the wielders of power, now depend on this silent multitude. Edo's peace has turned swords into pens and battles into bureaucracy. By the second day, the monotony feels endless. Yet Sakuma finds comfort in the repetition. To count, to record, to ensure nothing is missing, it is a kind of prayer. At midday, he sits beneath a persimmon tree and eats rice balls wrapped in bamboo leaves. The wind moves gently through the branches, carrying the scent of the sea. For the first time in months, he feels unobserved. He looks toward the distant horizon and wonders if his ancestors, the warriors who fought under banners and smoke, could understand this quiet life. Would they see honor in counting sacks of rice? Or would they call it surrender? He closes his eyes, hearing only the soft rustle of paper leaves in the wind. When he returns to Edo 3 days later, the city feels louder, heavier. His report is precise and uneventful. No theft, no mismanagement, no irregularities. Takamura commends his diligence with a single nod. Weeks pass, the seasons turn. The chrysanthemums in his garden bloom and fade. Ichinosuke grows taller, his handwriting steadier. One evening, while polishing his sword, Sakuma notices a small flaw on the blade, a faint spot where the metal has dulled. He hesitates before taking the whetstone to it. The blade, unused in battle, has begun to forget its purpose. He wonders, not for the first time, whether he too is beginning to dull. That night, as the house sleeps, he sits alone beneath the faint glow of the paper lantern. The silence feels thicker than usual. The inkstone on his desk is half dry. He dips the brush and writes Peltier. Peace, like the sword, must be maintained. If left unattended, both will rust. He sets down the brush and listens to the quiet breathing of his family through the paper walls. The words feel true, though he cannot yet understand their full meaning. For now, He records them as one more entry in a long book of uneventful days, a chronicle of calm. Yet somewhere beyond Edo's stillness, change is already stirring. New ships on foreign waters, whispers of reform, hunger in the countryside. The peace that shaped Sakuma's life may not last forever. And he, a man trained for no battle but obedience, will one day have to face a different kind of war, one fought not with swords, but with choices. The year is 1832. The cherry blossoms along the moat of Edo Castle fall in pale pink snow, drifting onto the water and vanishing one by one. The city has changed little in Sakuma Tadayori's lifetime, yet beneath its calm surface, time has begun to move differently, quietly, but insistently. Sakuma is now 54. His hair has thinned, his face lined from years spent bent over ledgers. His hands, once steady as calligraphy strokes, tremble faintly in the mornings before the tea takes effect. Still, his routine has not altered. He rises before dawn, sharpens his brush, and grinds ink as if peace itself depends upon his steadiness. It might, in a sense, be true. For in this Japan of the late Tokugawa era, a land sealed from the world, ruled by hierarchy and habit, the rhythm of daily life is the empire's heartbeat. Each man's small, repetitive duty sustains the greater illusion that nothing ever changes. But in the stillness, the first faint ripples of change are already spreading. Ichinosuke is now 20 years old. He walks taller than his father, his manner more open, his speech less careful. The younger generation of samurai, those raised entirely within peace, are educated, literate, and restless. They read foreign tales smuggled in from Nagasaki. They whisper of ships with black hulls and iron cannons, seen far across the sea. At dinner one evening, Ichinosuke sets down his bowl and speaks softly, but directly. "Father, what does it mean to serve?" Sakuma looks up from his rice. The question hangs in the air like smoke. "To serve," he says after a pause, "is to preserve order. We are samurai because we protect the peace." Ichinosuke frowns. "But there is no war, no enemy. We keep records and polish swords we never use. Is that peace or decay?" The boy's tone is not disrespectful, but it carries something sharp, something Sakuma once learned to suppress. He places his chopsticks down carefully. "There are many kinds of battle," he says. "Some are fought with blades, others with patience. If we abandon our place, chaos will follow." Ichinosuke nods, though his eyes remain doubtful. He has grown up in a city where merchants flaunt their wealth, where scholars discuss politics in coded poems, and where the old ways feel increasingly like theater. After dinner, as Oharu clears the table, she glances at her husband with quiet worry. "The boy has questions," she says softly. "All sons do," Sakuma replies. "It is their duty to ask them. Ours is to endure the asking." At the office, Sakuma's world remains unchanging. The same walls, the same scrolls, the same measured politeness. But even here the signs of unease appear. One morning, Takamura, his superior of many years, fails to arrive. By noon, word spreads. He has retired suddenly, citing illness. Some whisper that his dismissal was not voluntary. The shogunate, nervous about inefficiency and corruption, has begun to tighten its grip. New inspectors arrive, younger men with crisp uniforms and sharper eyes. Sakuma watches them in silence. They speak differently, brisk, impatient. The ledgers that once symbolized discipline are now treated as evidence, subject to scrutiny rather than reverence. He feels it then, the shift from peace to fear, from stillness to unease. The same routine continues, but its meaning changes. Each mark of his brush, each column of rice and coin, now feels like a confession, written in invisible ink. At home he sleeps poorly. The night watchman's clappers echo louder than before. The city that once lulled him with its sameness now hums with something unspoken. The year turns, taxes rise, the price of rice wavers. For the first time, Sakuma's household struggles. Their stipend, measured in grain, not currency, buys less with each season. The merchant class, once beneath them, thrives. Oharu begins to sell her embroidered cloths at the market, quietly and without announcement. She folds them into a basket and walks with measured dignity, careful not to be recognized by other samurai wives. When she returns with a few coins, she places them on the household ledger without comment. Sakuma pretends not to notice. To speak of it would be to admit that their class has become ornamental. That night, as they sit by the fire, she finally says, "Perhaps Ichinosuke should seek work in trade. He has skill with writing, and the merchants pay well for men who can read and calculate." Sakuma's face tightens. He is of samurai blood. "Blood does not buy rice," she replies gently. The silence that follows is heavier than argument. He does not answer, but later that night, he writes again in his diary. "Pride is the last sword a man can draw, when all others have been taken. Yet even pride, when polished too long, becomes a mirror. I fear I have looked into it too often." In the summer of 1853, word arrives of ships, foreign ships anchored at Edo Bay. Black smoke, iron hulls, cannons. The peace of 2 centuries trembles like paper in the wind. For the first time, Sakuma witnesses something close to fear among his peers. The shogunate calls for readiness, though no one quite knows what that means. Soldiers drill, messengers run, and every household is ordered to prepare emergency supplies. Ichinosuke, now in the service of a small administrative post, returns home with wide eyes. "They say the foreigners demand we open our ports," he says. "Some call it diplomacy, others call it invasion." Sakuma listens quietly. He feels the weight of his sword beside him, as if the blade itself stirs at the thought of use after so many years. But the truth is plain. He is old, and Japan's battles will no longer be fought by men like him. "Do you think we will fight?" his son asks. Sakuma shakes his head. "No. The time for fighting passed long before these ships arrived. We have forgotten how." That night, he dreams of his ancestors, men in armor, banners fluttering in chaos. But their faces are blank, their voices distant. He wakes before dawn and sits for a long time beside the window, watching the river drift past. The paper doors rattle softly in the morning wind. For the first time, he feels something close to grief, not for what has been lost, but for what was never used. A year later, he is summoned once again to inspect the granaries. It is a journey he has made many times, but this one feels different. The roads are busier now. Travelers, soldiers, merchants, missionaries, all moving as if the country itself has begun to stir from a long sleep. At the granary, the rice is plentiful, but the workers complain of confusion. New orders, shifting measures, rumors of reform. Sakuma listens, records and signs his reports as always, yet the brush feels heavier in his hand. That evening, as the sun sets over the storehouses, he walks among the rows of sealed sacks. The air is still, the scent of rice thick. He rests his palm on one of the bags and feels the cool firmness beneath the cloth. Grain, food, wealth, power, the true blood of the nation. He realizes that all his life, he has served not the sword, not the Lord, not even the law, but this. The quiet continuity of sustenance. The invisible current that flows from the peasant's hand to the samurai's bowl, unbroken for generations. He whispers aloud, "This is the peace we protect." And in that moment, he understands the truth of his existence. That to preserve even the smallest harmony, someone must stand watch over the ordinary. In the winter of that same year, Sakuma falls ill. It begins with a cough that does not fade. He grows weaker, though he continues to write in his diary until his hand can no longer steady the brush. Oharu tends to him faithfully. Ichinosuke sits beside his bed in silence, reading aloud from the old ledgers his father once kept. The records of rice and coin, of shipments and seasons, these, strangely, are the stories that soothe him most. On his final morning, as the pale light filters through the paper doors, Sakuma asks to see his sword. Ichinosuke brings it, polished and gleaming. He looks at it for a long time, then says, almost to himself, "Steel remembers, even if it never cuts." He closes his eyes. Outside, a watchman's clappers echo faintly through the street, the same sound that marked his childhood, his manhood, and now, his passing. Oharu will later keep his diary beside the family altar. In its pages, Ichinosuke finds the last entry, written in a wavering hand. Peace is not the absence of war. It is the art of remaining still when everything demands motion. I have lived my life as a paper door, thin, fragile, easily torn, yet I have kept the wind from entering. Years later, Ichinosuke will witness the fall of the shogunate. He will see the banners of the old samurai lowered and the empire reborn under a new sun. He will no longer wear the swords his father polished so faithfully. He will take work as a clerk in a trading firm, writing ledgers not of rice, but of coal and iron. Yet each morning before he begins, he will grind his ink slowly, carefully, the way his father once did. The sound will remind him of Edo's quiet mornings, of his mother's humming, of paper doors sliding open to let in the dawn. And sometimes, when the world outside grows too loud, he will think of Sakuma's final words and whisper them softly to himself. Peace must be maintained, or it will rust. The paper doors of Edo no longer stand. The house, the office, the granaries, all gone. But in the faint trace of brushstrokes across time, the quiet heart of one samurai still beats, patient, measured, and enduring. The Tokugawa shogunate, by the middle of the 18th century, had perfected a peculiar kind of rule, one not built on conquest, but on continuity. The wars were long over, the borders sealed. What remained was the vast, slow machinery of peace, moving in precise, deliberate circles. You can hear it in the sound of brushes on paper. Every province, every domain, every office had its keepers of ink, men who recorded, counted, confirmed, and copied until history itself seemed to be written not by generals, but by accountants. These were the bureaucrats of Edo, Japan, the invisible spine of a motionless empire. The office smells of ink, straw, and rain. Rain because the city never seems to dry ink, because it flows endlessly here, dark and patient. Rows of desks line the tatami floor, each attended by a man in subdued robes. Their sleeves are tied back, their heads bowed, their gestures identical: dip, write, exhale, repeat. The shogunate's rice accounting office sits deep within Edo Castle's administrative quarter. It is not a place of grandeur. Its walls are plain wood, its floor bare. Yet within these walls, the empire's most vital numbers are kept: the harvest tallies, the grain stipends, the reserves that measure the balance of power itself. Rice is the currency of the Tokugawa world. Every domain is measured in koku, the amount of rice required to feed one person for a year. about 150 kilograms. The wealth of a daimyo, the salary of a samurai, even the taxes of peasants, all of it flows through these ledgers. The clerks who manage them are not noblemen nor merchants, but a curious hybrid: low-ranking samurai, educated commoners, and hereditary scribes known as yoriki and doshin. They are the nervous system of the shogunate's peace, men who translate the labor of millions into lines of ink. One of them, a quiet man named Naito Shigezane, has worked here for 26 years. He is 50, though the years have worn him lightly. His beard is trimmed close, his posture precise, his eyes quick but calm. His robe, dyed the dull blue of administrative service, bears no crest, a mark of modest rank. Every morning he arrives before sunrise. He removes his sandals, bows to the north wall, and sits cross-legged before his desk. He grinds his ink in silence, the slow scrape of stone against stone echoing softly through the chamber. Around him, other men do the same. It is a ritual, not a necessity. The ink could be ground faster, but haste offends harmony. The chief clerk calls out the day's agenda: review of the Kaga domain's reports, reconciliation of tribute from Satsuma, inspection of Edo rice reserves. Each man nods. The words are formalities. The work never truly ends, nor truly changes. Naito opens a bound ledger nearly as large as his torso. The paper, mulberry and soft, bears faint yellow stains from years of handling. His brush moves slowly but unerringly across its surface, copying figures from a report delivered the day before. The numbers themselves are dull: 45,312 koku from Kaga, 9,082 from Echizen, but together they form the map of an empire's stability. Behind every entry lies a chain of cause and effect: fields measured, peasants counted, harvests taxed, stores sealed. The office's purpose is not simply to tally rice, but to preserve the illusion that every grain is accounted for, that the system, immense and ancient, still breathes with precision. Every month, couriers arrive from distant domains, carrying bundles of paper tied with straw cord. Each sheet represents the labor of entire villages, the sweat of farmers, the burden of taxation, the patience of inspectors. When the couriers kneel before the clerks and present the bundles, they bow as though offering tribute to a shrine. The clerks receive them with equal solemnity. They untie the cords, flatten the papers, and compare figures across reports. If a single digit is inconsistent, the courier is detained until it is explained, sometimes for hours, sometimes days. This is how the Tokugawa peace endures, not through battle, but through balance sheets. At midday, the clerks eat in near silence. Bento boxes open in unison. Tea is poured, the rain outside murmurs against the shutters. The air smells faintly of pickled radish and damp paper. Conversation, when it happens, is restrained. They speak of the weather, the thickness of ink, or the best way to dry ledgers in humid seasons. Occasionally, one mentions poetry, usually a verse about clouds, cicadas, or fleeting time. Naito himself writes small haiku in the margins of his notes. He never shows them to anyone, but they are his private rebellion against monotony. Ink flows, rain falls. The empire sleeps on paper, each drop accounted. When the meal ends, the men return to their desks. The sound resumes, the scratch of brushes, the faint tap of abacuses, the sigh of wooden drawers sliding open. It is a music of maintenance, a lullaby for a system that fears interruption. Late that afternoon, the room stills. The Matsuke, an official inspector of the shogunate, arrives unannounced. His presence turns the air brittle. He is a man of severe face and measured steps, accompanied by 2 assistants. He bows slightly. By order of the Council of Elders, we will conduct an audit of your ledgers. The chief clerk bows deeper. At once, honorable inspector. The men work faster now, their calm precision strained by the presence of scrutiny. Naito's hands do not tremble, but he feels the old ache in his shoulders return. Each stroke of his brush seems heavier, as though the ink itself resists him. The Metsuke moves silently between desks, glancing at figures, nodding without expression. Finally, he stops beside Naito. "You have served here long, have you not?" "Yes, honorable sir." "Then you understand the importance of accuracy." "I do." The inspector gestures to one column of figures. "This sum, you are certain of it?" Naito examines the number. 18,456 koku, the recorded surplus of a western domain. He checks the subcolumns: inflow, storage, distribution. The figures align perfectly. Yes, it has been verified twice. The inspector studies him for a moment, then moves on without comment. When he leaves, the office exhales collectively. The sound of brushes resumes. Rain patters softly against the eaves. No errors are found. The peace continues. That night, as Naito walks home through the drizzle, he reflects on the day's inspection. Not on the fear of failure, but on the strange comfort of procedure. The shogunate system is vast, rigid, and eternal, or so it appears. Each man's small task, repeated faithfully, becomes a pillar supporting the illusion. He passes a group of children splashing in puddles, their laughter echoing against the narrow alley walls. He cannot remember the last time he laughed aloud. At home, his wife has prepared miso soup and grilled mackerel. She greets him with a bow rather than words. Their life, like the office, is structured by unspoken rhythm. He eats slowly, cleans his bowl, and retires to his writing desk. There, by the light of an oil lamp, he opens a small notebook, his private diary, written in a steady, almost ceremonial hand. He records not the affairs of government, but the details of the day that official ledgers ignore. Rain since dawn, inkstone smooth, no errors found. The inspector's gaze sharp as a blade. The world remains balanced, though it sways beneath the weight of numbers. He pauses, then adds, "Sometimes I wonder whether the figures we keep are records of life or replacements for it." He sets down the brush, blows out the lamp, and listens to the steady rhythm of rain against the paper doors. Beyond Edo, the system he serves stretches like a web across the archipelago. In the north, samurai clerks measure grain shipments through snow. In Kyushu, officials in humid storehouses scrape mold from rice sacks and copy tallies by candlelight. Couriers travel along the Tokaido Road, carrying reports wrapped in oil paper, guarded more carefully than gold. Each report converges in Edo, where men like Naito record them into the Grand Register, the Book of the Realm. The book is not read by the shogun himself, but it defines his reach more surely than any sword. To rule Japan in this age is to keep it counted, weighed, and written. If a figure goes missing, a man is punished. If a ledger burns, a province must rewrite its past. In this way, bureaucracy becomes memory, and memory, control. Late one evening, as the lanterns burn low, Naito finds himself alone in the office. The others have gone, only the faint murmur of rain remains. He stands before the shelves, lined with thousands of ledgers. Each bears the mark of a year, a season, a domain. Together, they form an unbroken record stretching back more than a century. He thinks of how many hands have written these same figures. How many lives have passed through this room unnoticed? Each clerk believed his work vital, yet none are remembered. The ledgers remain, the men fade. He opens one at random, the year 1714. The handwriting is neat, the ink still dark. The name of the clerk is written small in the corner, Yamada Kinzo. Naito has never heard of him. He closes the book gently, as one might close a tomb. Perhaps, he thinks, this is the truest form of immortality, to vanish so completely that only your handwriting survives. Outside, the rain stops. The night air is cool and still. He slides open the paper doors and looks out over the dark courtyard. Lantern light reflects faintly on the wet stones. In the distance, a temple bell sounds 9 times. Naito bows slightly toward the sound, not out of piety, but out of habit. The gesture feels like punctuation to a sentence he has been writing his whole life. He whispers to himself, "Tomorrow, I will begin again." But as he slides the doors shut, he notices a thin crack along the frame, wood warped by years of damp. It seems nothing, yet he pauses, tracing it with his finger. He feels a chill, a thought unspoken but persistent. If the doors can warp, perhaps the system can too. If the empire of paper ever tears, who will remember how to mend it? The ink pot beside him glistens faintly in the lamplight. Black, bottomless, endless. The next year begins with frost. Edo lies beneath a veil of white, the river sluggish and the air crisp. The roofs of the castle shimmer faintly in the weak winter sun. For most of the city, the snow brings inconvenience for Naito Shigezane. It brings a strange serenity. Snow, after all, is nature's way of balancing accounts, each flake a quiet correction in the ledgers of the world. Inside the Bureau of Rice Accounting, the fire crackles softly in its brazier. The men work wrapped in extra layers, their breath visible in the cold air. The ink stiffens, the brushes dry too quickly. Still, the rhythm continues. Dip, write, exhale. The ledgers themselves, their edges curled from humidity and years of handling, seem to resist the cold. They hold within them the heat of generations, the memory of hands that have turned these same pages through flood, famine, and festival. But lately, something in the air feels uncertain, even in this most stable of offices. It begins with a single discrepancy, a number too small to notice, yet too large to ignore. The annual report from the Echigo domain arrives in early February, tied with straw and sealed with the crest of its local magistrate. The figures are neat, the seals intact. But when Naito compares them to the prior year's report, he notices a difference. 312 koku of rice unaccounted for. He checks again, then again. The columns add up perfectly within each report, but the year-to-year totals do not. Somewhere, between one winter and the next, a shipment has vanished. He marks the margin with a small circle of ink, a symbol for inquiry. It is a minor irregularity, common enough to resolve through clerical explanation. Still, his pulse quickens slightly. For in the empire of ledgers, even small errors have long shadows. He brings the matter to his superior, Chief Clerk Uemura, a man of dignified fatigue. Uemura squints at the report. A shipment lost, perhaps, or misrecorded. The couriers are careless these days. Naito nods, but the numbers stay in his mind. 300 koku, enough to feed a village for a year. A number that might mean little to the powerful, but much to the hungry. That winter, rumors drift through Edo like cold wind. In the countryside beyond the capital, crops have failed. Heavy rains in the summer, followed by frost in the autumn, have left many villages short of rice. Merchants profit quietly by hoarding grain prices rise. The city's markets remain stocked, but poorer families begin to stretch their meals thin. At night, walking home from the office, Naito passes narrow alleys where the scent of boiled millet, poor man's rice, fills the air. He recalls the missing koku from Echigo and feels a weight in his chest. Numbers, he realizes, are not abstractions. They are human lives rendered invisible. Yet in the office, the ledgers continue to flow, page after page, as though nothing has changed. The shogunate's peace depends on stability, and stability demands blindness to small sufferings. Weeks pass. The investigation into the discrepancy leads nowhere. The domain officials reply with polite apologies and revised figures that erase the problem entirely. Chief Clerk Uemura signs off the case. "Let it rest," he tells Naito. "Our duty is accuracy, not justice." Naito bows and says nothing, but the words echo within him, discordant and hollow. Accuracy, not justice. That night at home, he writes in his private notebook, "I have recorded more numbers than I can remember, and yet none belong to me. If truth itself is inconvenient, do we still owe it fidelity?" He sets the brush down. The ink on his fingers smudges the page. The smudge looks like a small, spreading bruise. In early spring, a messenger from Echigo arrives in Edo, carrying supplementary records. He is a young man, barely 20, thin and nervous. His name is Okada Ren. When Naito meets him in the courtyard, he notes the man's trembling hands, the tiredness in his face. The journey has taken weeks. Okada bows deeply and presents the documents wrapped in oil paper. "These are the corrected ledgers, Honorable Clerk," he says. "My superiors beg forgiveness for the earlier errors." Naito accepts the package, but his curiosity stirs. "Tell me," he asks gently, "how fare the villages in Echigo this winter?" The young man hesitates. "Poorly, sir. The harvest was weak. Many have sold their tools. Some eat millet and bark." And yet Naito says softly, "Your report shows full yield." Okada's eyes flicker downward. He does not reply. Instead he bows again, deeper this time, almost apologetically, and leaves. When Naito opens the documents, he finds the same figures as before, rewritten in fresher ink. The missing rice has reappeared, on paper. He closes the ledger carefully, as though it were fragile glass. He understands now what the silence of bureaucracy conceals. In the following weeks, Naito's work becomes heavier. He performs each task as always, precise, polite, unerring, but his thoughts no longer follow the brush. Every number feels like a shadow cast by something unseen. He watches his colleagues, their faces expressionless, their gestures perfectly rehearsed. Perhaps they all know. Perhaps they too carry small fragments of dishonesty tucked between their lines of ink, smoothed over for the sake of peace. He begins to notice details he once ignored. The faint tremor in the chief clerk's hands, the weary sighs that accompany the stamping of seals, the way the ink seems darker on days when the reports come from distant, struggling provinces. Edo itself continues without pause. Courtesans stroll through the pleasure quarters, kabuki theaters draw crowds, and the street vendors shout prices with forced cheer. But beneath the surface, Naito feels the empire shifting, like a roof beam creaking under invisible strain. One evening, he finds himself unable to sleep. The moon is high, silvering the paper doors. He rises quietly, careful not to wake his wife, and sits at his writing desk. He opens a fresh sheet and writes a letter, not to anyone in particular, but to the invisible conscience he still believes exists within the world. If accuracy is duty and truth is burden, then which is heavier? The records are pure, the figures exact, but they are built upon silence. We call this peace, yet it is peace only for those who can afford not to count hunger. He does not sign it. He folds it carefully and places it inside his diary. The ink glistens faintly in the lamplight, then fades as the paper dries. The next morning, he resumes work as usual. By midsummer, word begins to circulate. The shogunate plans new measures to address rural hardship. Some say a new census will be ordered, others that a portion of the castle's rice reserves will be distributed to the provinces. In the bureau, opinions differ. The younger clerks whisper optimism. More work, perhaps, but also purpose. The older ones murmur skepticism. Every reform begins with paper and ends with more paper, Uemura says dryly. Still, Naito feels something stir. Perhaps this is his chance to act, to record not just the numbers, but the truth behind them. When the official notice arrives, he volunteers to oversee the verification of reports from several famine-stricken regions. His request is granted without objection. The task is tedious, unglamorous, and therefore safe. He travels by river barge to the coastal offices where the provincial ledgers are stored. The journey takes days, and the landscape unfolds like a slow, ink-washed scroll. Reed marshes, distant hills, silent villages. In the inspection office, he meets local scribes, tired men who greet him with bows too deep to be sincere. They show him their ledgers, clean, orderly, faultless. Yet as he turns the pages, he notices a faint irregularity. The paper of one section newer than the rest, the handwriting subtly different. "These were copied recently?" he asks. "Yes, Honorable Inspector. The originals were damaged by dampness." Naito runs his fingers along the edge of the page. The dampness, he suspects, is a metaphor. He records the inspection formally, reports verified, records intact. Then in his private notebook, he writes a single line. The truth decays faster than rice. When he returns to Edo in autumn, the air smells of burning leaves and rain. His superiors praise his diligence. The discrepancy is declared resolved, the ledgers sealed for the year. The empire once again appears whole. But Naito feels no satisfaction. The system, he realizes, is not meant to reveal truth, only to preserve appearances. Every corrected figure is a patch upon a widening crack. He walks home through the drizzle, past shop fronts glowing with lamplight. A merchant's apprentice sweeps water from the doorway, humming a song about luck and rice. The tune drifts faintly through the night air, light and careless. He envies that ease. At home he finds his wife kneeling by the fire, mending his robe. She looks up and smiles softly. "You are tired." He nods. The work is endless. "Then it must mean you are needed." Her words, meant as comfort, cut instead. To be needed by a system that forgets its people, what kind of duty is that? That night, as the rain thickens, Naito dreams of ledgers that stretch endlessly through the darkness. Each page bears numbers written in water, fading even as he reads them. Somewhere, he hears the sound of a brush moving, faster and faster, until the pages blur into silence. He wakes before dawn, the sound of real rain echoing the dream. He lies still, staring at the ceiling, as the thought returns, quiet but insistent. If the empire's peace depends on lies too small to see, then is it truly peace at all? By the late 1840s, Edo's rhythm has begun to tremble. The seasons still change, the rice still flows, the ledgers still fill with neat black lines, yet the stillness feels brittle now, like ice stretched too thin. The clerks of the shogunate continue their duties, as if through ritual alone they can hold the world in balance. But the balance itself is beginning to tilt. Naito Shigezane, now in his late 50s, feels the change as one feels the coming of rain, first as heaviness in the air, then as sound. The empire of ledgers, once steady as stone, has begun to whisper. It begins quietly, as all disruptions do. One winter morning, the chief clerk Uemura does not arrive. At first no one remarks on it. Illness is common in the cold months. But days pass, and still his cushion remains empty. On the fourth day, word arrives that Uemura has retired for health reasons. The phrase, "Naito knows," is one the bureaucracy uses when it wishes to forget someone gently. 2 weeks later, a notice is posted. The new chief clerk, appointed directly from the Council of Elders, is a young man named Fujimoto Keisuke, barely 30, ambitious, confident, and impatient. The first time he enters the office, he does not bow. He scans the room with quick assessing eyes and says, "We will modernize the system. Efficiency must replace custom." The words fall like stones in a pond. The older clerks exchange subtle glances but remain silent. To question authority is to risk the unthinkable, being replaced by someone younger, faster, cheaper. Naito bows his head, but a quiet unease settles in him. Efficiency, he knows, is the polite word for forgetting. Under Fujimoto's direction, the bureau changes. The old inkstones are replaced with pre-ground ink. The ledgers are copied by assistants rather than by the original recorders. Procedures once performed in silence are now timed, measured, and inspected. The shogunate must adapt, Fujimoto declares. Precision is no longer enough. We must show progress. He introduces new forms, written in a standardized script, leaving less space for commentary or reflection. Marginal notes, the small, personal annotations that once recorded subtle truths, are now forbidden. Numbers speak for themselves, he says. Naito obeys, outwardly without complaint. But inside, he feels the slow unthreading of something sacred. The act of writing, once meditative, now feels mechanical. The ink dries too quickly. The paper feels lifeless. He finds himself making small errors for the first time in years. A digit inverted, a column misaligned. He corrects them at once, but the confidence that once anchored his work is gone. The bureau has become efficient, yes, but it has also become hollow. Outside the castle walls, Edo hums louder each year. Foreign traders press for access to Japan's ports. Merchants grow rich beyond precedent. Peasants, taxed to exhaustion, flee to the cities seeking work. In the Yoshiwara pleasure quarter, the courtesans now serve wealthy townsmen instead of samurai. The air smells of oil lamps, cheap sake, and ambition. One evening, Naito walks through the Nihonbashi district after work. He watches porters carrying crates of sugar and cloth, and young apprentices shouting advertisements for tea shops. Their energy feels foreign to him, alive, unbound. He realizes that the world outside the bureau no longer believes in the peace he has spent his life recording. The city is already writing a new story, one not measured in koku, but in coins. As he passes a bookseller's stall, a pamphlet catches his eye. A treatise written in simple language, arguing that the government's grain policies are unjust. Its author, anonymous, claims to be a former official who saw famine hidden in the ledgers. Naito's hand trembles slightly as he turns the page. The writing feels too familiar. He could have written it himself. He buys the pamphlet and hides it inside his robe. At home that night, he reads by lamplight. The pamphlet's words strike with uncomfortable precision. To count without conscience is to starve in comfort. The ledgers preserve peace only by ignoring hunger. The brush that lies politely is the sharpest weapon of all. He closes the pages slowly. The ink smudges his thumb, still wet from the press. Uhahu, his wife, enters quietly and sets down a cup of tea. "You're working late again," she says. "I am reading," he replies. "Something dangerous, perhaps." She glances at the pamphlet but does not ask. Her silence is not ignorance, it is care. In Edo, the fewer words spoken, the safer the night. After she leaves, Naito sits for a long time, the paper warm from his hands. The writer's courage, or recklessness, stirs something long dormant within him. He opens his own notebook and writes, "Perhaps our peace endures only because we do not look too closely. I have spent my life keeping the surface smooth, but below it, the grain rots. I begin to wonder if the brush is not a tool of order, but of concealment." He stops, startled by his own words. Then he dips the brush again and draws a single black circle, the same mark he once used to indicate an inquiry. He leaves the page blank beneath it. The following month, Fujimoto announces an inspection of all bureau documents for the past decade. "The elders wish to confirm consistency," he says. "We must prove our reliability." Naito feels a cold tremor. The older records, his records, contain notes and marginalia, long forbidden under the new order. Small observations, comments, and corrections that reveal too much truth. He stays late for several nights, reviewing his old ledgers by lamplight. The paper has yellowed, the ink smells faintly of mold. He finds the Echigo records, the ones with the missing rice, the silent famine. The pages are neat, but the ink beneath the corrections tells a story invisible to all but him. He traces the faint underlines with his finger and whispers, "I remember." He could erase them, rewrite them to match the modern style, but to do so would be to erase his own existence, the quiet integrity that sustained him through decades of obedience. He closes the book and sits in stillness. Outside, rain begins to fall. The soft, endless rain of Edo that always seems to accompany difficult thoughts. The day of the inspection arrives. Fujimoto and two auditors from the council sit behind low desks, their brushes ready to note discrepancies. The air is heavy with damp ink and nervous breath. The ledgers are brought out in stacks, each bound in straw cord. Naito kneels before them, presenting his volumes one by one. The auditors examine them carefully, page by page. At first, all is routine, a few compliments on his handwriting, a nod at his precision. Then, one of the auditors pauses. He frowns slightly, tapping a page with his finger. "These annotations," he says, "they are irregular. Why were they written?" Naito bows his head. "To clarify the origin of figures, Honorable Inspector. Nothing more." "Antrons are now prohibited," Fujimoto interjects coldly. "They complicate the record." The auditor nods. "Then we will remove them." Naito feels the words like a blow. Remove them, as though the past itself could be redacted. But he says nothing. He bows again. When the inspection ends, the auditors leave satisfied. Fujimoto remains. He turns to Naito and says, quietly but firmly, "The era of interpretation is over. We must serve through silence." Naito bows once more. "Yes, sir." But in his heart, something fractures, a small clean break. That night, Naito returns to the bureau after hours. The corridors are empty, the lamps dim. He walks to the archive room, rows upon rows of ledgers sleeping behind wooden screens. He opens his own record book one last time. The ink seems darker in the low light. He tears a single page free, the one from Echigo, the record of the missing grain, and folds it carefully. In its margin, he writes a single haiku. The rain counts for none, yet it fills every basin. What number is truth? He places the page into his sleeve and walks out, closing the door softly behind him. At home, he hides the page inside his diary, beneath the unsigned letter he wrote years ago. He does not destroy it, nor reveal it. It is enough that it exists, a quiet defiance preserved in paper. In 1854, foreign ships once again appear in Edo Bay. The city trembles with rumor and uncertainty. New treaties are signed, old hierarchies bend. The shogunate's vast bureaucracy strains under the pressure of a changing world. Naito retires that same year. His departure goes unnoticed, recorded in the smallest script in the office log. Service concluded due to age. He spends his remaining days tending a small garden near the Sumida River. His hands, once blackened with ink, are now stained by soil. He watches the river flow and thinks of ledgers, the illusion that anything, even water, can be contained by lines. Sometimes he writes haiku on scraps of paper and lets them drift downstream. The brush dries at last. Yet the water keeps its path, unwritten, alive. He dies quietly in his sleep one summer morning. His wife finds his diary beside him, closed neatly, the ink dry. Inside are the letter, the torn ledger page, and a note in his final shaky hand. I have kept records my entire life. Today, I let one go. Years later, during the upheavals of the Meiji Restoration, the old Bureau of Rice Accounting is dissolved. Its ledgers, deemed obsolete, are stored in a temple warehouse, where they gather dust and mold. One rainy afternoon, a young historian sorting through the archives finds a single page tucked into a forgotten volume. It bears a haiku written in faded ink. The handwriting is elegant, deliberate, the script of a man who believed in order. The historian reads it, frowns thoughtfully, and copies it into his notebook. He does not know the author's name. He does not need to. The haiku reads, "The rain counts for none, yet it fills every basin. What number is truth?" He smiles faintly, closes the book, and steps outside into the drizzle. The city has changed beyond recognition, but the rain falls exactly as it did in Naito's time, patient, unmeasured, eternal. And so, the bureaucrats of the Tokugawa era, the men of rice, rain, and routine, fade from history. They left behind no monuments, no victories, no wars. Only ink, paper, and the quiet rhythm that once held an empire still. The path to the temple winds through the foothills of Kamakura, narrow and uneven, shaded by old cedar trees that lean toward one another, as if conspiring to keep the mountain's secrets. The year is 1689. Japan is at peace, but peace, like moss, grows thickest in places untouched by ambition. In these hills, where the air smells faintly of rain and pine, the world has forgotten how to hurry. You arrive at dawn. The mist clings to the bamboo groves, and the bell of Engakuji Temple tolls a low, resonant note that drifts through the valley. The monks move silently along the corridors, their sandals whispering across worn wooden floors. Among them walks an old man, shaven head, eyes half-lidded, robes faded the color of earth. His name is Sogen, and for 40 years he has tended the temple's garden. He was not always a monk. Once long ago, he was a soldier in the service of a minor lord. His hands, now gentle with soil, once held the hilt of a sword. But the wars ended before his courage could be tested, and when peace spread across the land, he found himself useless. A man trained for a violence that the world no longer required. So he traded his armor for robes, his command for silence. The garden he inherited was nothing more than a patch of earth overgrown with weeds. The temple elders gave it little thought. It was a place for meditation, not display. But Sogen saw in it a form of scripture, something that could not be read, only tended. He rises each morning before sunrise. The mountain air bites his skin. He sweeps the paths of fallen leaves, trims the moss that creeps between stones, and rakes the gravel into patterns so precise that even the wind seems reluctant to disturb them. The work is endless, repetitive and quiet, and in that repetition, he finds peace. To the visitors who come to pray, Sogen is nearly invisible. They bow before the Buddha, offer coins at the altar, and depart, unaware of the man who arranges the silence around them. Yet without his hands, their prayers would have nowhere to settle. He has learned that devotion is not in chanting, but in doing the same small task until it disappears into the body like breath. Sometimes the younger monks ask him questions. Why does he rake the gravel each day, even when no one walks upon it? Why does he prune the pine in winter when it looks dead already? Sogen smiles, but seldom answers. He only says, "A thing well cared for stays alive, even in stillness." They bow, unsatisfied but respectful. The garden changes little, but he knows its moods. The way the moss deepens after a week of rain, the way the sunlight shifts between equinox and solstice. He can tell the season by the weight of dew on the grass. The elders call it wisdom. He calls it attention. In spring, pilgrims come from Edo, their robes bright and voices loud. They leave offerings of incense and copper coins. Some bring children, who chase dragonflies through the gravel paths until a novice gently scolds them. Sogen watches from the shade of a maple tree, neither irritated nor amused. Noise is just another kind of weather. It passes. By midsummer, the air grows thick, and cicadas scream from the trees in relentless rhythm. The monks retreat indoors to escape the heat, but Sogen stays in the garden. Sweat darkens his robe, dust clings to his feet, and the sound of his rake cuts through the hum of insects like a faint, steady heartbeat. He works until the bell sounds for the evening meal, and only then does he sit back straight, legs crossed, hands resting on his knees. The temple's abbot, an old man named Ryokai, often joins him at twilight. They speak rarely. Once years ago, Ryokai asked, "Do you ever miss the sword?" Sogen had smiled faintly. No, it only cut the air. The rake leaves marks that the rain remembers. Decades pass this way, measured not by years but by seasons. Moss overtakes the stones, new saplings rise where old ones fall. The garden becomes a mirror of the man who tends it, modest, enduring, content with imperfection. But one autumn, the balance begins to shift. The shogunate, far away in Edo, sends word that the temple lands must be surveyed for taxation. Officials arrive in their crisp robes carrying scrolls and instruments. They measure the boundaries of Engakuji, note the value of its buildings, even the productivity of its soil. To them, the garden is not a sanctuary but property, an entry in a ledger. Sogen watches them from the veranda, his hands resting quietly in his sleeves. The officials step across the gravel without removing their sandals, their boots leaving marks that disrupt his careful patterns. He says nothing. When they leave, he rakes the paths again, slower than usual, his movements deliberate, almost tender. That evening, as the sun sinks behind the hills, Ryokai joins him once more. They are counting what cannot be counted, the abbot says softly. Sogen nods. The world grows impatient with silence. In the days that follow, he continues his routine, though the presence of the officials lingers in his mind like a stain. For the first time, he feels the weight of impermanence, not as comfort, but as loss. The garden, which had seemed eternal, now feels fragile, something that could be measured, owned, or sold. Winter arrives early that year. The first snow falls in fine, quiet flakes, settling on the raked gravel like powdered sugar. Sogen kneels to brush the snow from a stone lantern, his fingers stiff with cold. The garden sleeps beneath its white blanket, perfect and still. In the silence, he remembers his youth, the long marches, the empty barracks, the sound of rain on armor. He realizes that he has spent his life moving from one discipline to another, from war to peace, but always toward obedience. The sword, the rake, the temple bell, all instruments of order. That night, he dreams that the garden has flooded. The gravel paths are rivers the moss islands float away. He stands on the veranda, helpless, as the patterns dissolve beneath the water. When he wakes, his pillow is damp with tears he does not remember shedding. The next morning, the snow begins to melt. Water trickles through the stones, carrying small leaves toward the pond. Sogen sits beside it, watching the ripples spread until they disappear. He feels something shift inside him. Not sorrow, not fear, but an awareness that the garden's beauty lies in its vulnerability. To care for something that will never last, that is the purest form of devotion. By spring, the world seems new again. The plum blossoms open, pale pink against the grey temple walls. The garden breathes. A novice approaches him shyly, holding a rake too large for his hands. "Master Sogen." He whispers, "Why do we wake so early when there is nothing to do but the same things again?" Sogen looks at him, smiling slightly. "If you think the same thing happens twice," he says, "then you are not yet awake." The boy frowns, puzzled, but stays close as the old monk begins his sweeping. The brooms whisper against the stones, brushing away leaves that have fallen overnight. With each sweep, the boy notices something he missed before, a faint trail left by a snail, the shimmer of a spider web near the pond. By the time the bell sounds from the main hall, the question no longer matters. When the day grows hot, Sogen retreats to the shade and begins to prune the temple's single pine tree. He climbs carefully, tying his robe to the trunk for balance. From above, he can see the garden's pattern, the circular raked gravel surrounding the central moss island, the pond reflecting the sky, the stepping stones forming a silent path toward the hall. From this height, it looks both infinite and fragile, as though a breath might undo it all. A small group of travelers arrives at midday, wealthy men from Edo seeking enlightenment. They are loud, perfumed, and impatient. Their sandals slap against the stones, their fans flick open and shut. The monks greet them politely, offering tea and a view of the garden. One of the visitors, a merchant with a proud voice, remarks, "So much labor to make it look like nothing." Sogen, still in the pine tree, hears this and smiles faintly. The merchant is not wrong. The art of stillness always looks effortless to those who never attempt it. When evening comes, the visitors are gone. The air cools, and the sound of frogs rises from the pond. The monks gather for sutra recitation. Sogen sits at the back of the hall, his knees aching, his hands resting loosely in his lap. He listens to the chanting not as words, but as rhythm, a tide that carries him inward. After prayers, the abbot Ryokai approaches. His step has grown slower in recent months, his voice softer. The officials from Edo will return soon, he says. They wish to review our records. They talk of new taxes. Sogen nods. He expected this. The shogunate's appetite for order has reached even here, to this quiet place between forest and sea. The garden will not change its yield, he says gently. Ryokai smiles. If only the world could be measured like gravel. The next morning, as mist drifts through the cedars, the officials arrive again. Their robes are fine, their sandals polished, their eyes sharp. They walk through the garden, counting steps, marking notes on scrolls. One points at the pond and asks whether it produces fish. Another wonders if the temple's land could support more vegetables. They speak of taxes, as if they were whether inevitable, impersonal. Sogen kneels by the gravel, pretending not to listen, but he hears everything. When the officials leave, Ryokai exhales and mutters. They see only what feeds the body. Sogen looks at the newly disturbed paths, footprints crossing the clean lines. And we, he replies quietly, tend what feeds the rest. That night, thunder rolls over the hills. Rain falls in steady sheets, flattening the patterns, turning the gravel into a silver pool. The pond swells, spilling over its banks. The garden disappears beneath the storm. Sogen stands at the veranda, watching the water rise. He does not move to stop it. There is nothing to stop. Nature has its own designs, larger and more ancient than his. When dawn comes, the rain ceases, leaving behind a silence deeper than before. The garden is a ruin of mud and scattered leaves. The paths are gone, the pond cloudy, the moss torn away. Ryo, the young novice, stares in horror. All your work, master, he says. It's gone. Sogen kneels in the mud, scoops a handful of it into his palm, and lets it slip between his fingers. No, he says softly. It has changed. The boy does not understand, but he helps anyway. Together they begin to rebuild, stone by stone. The work takes days. Their hands blister, their robes stain, but the rhythm returns. The new lines they draw are rougher, less perfect. When the abbot comes to see, he nods approvingly. It looks alive, he says. That night, after the others sleep, Sogen sits beside the pond, listening to the croak of frogs and the faint murmur of wind. He realizes the storm has given him something he did not know he was waiting for: permission to let go. The garden will never again be as it was, but perhaps that is its truth. He no longer feels bound to preserve it against time. His work now is not to resist change, but to tend what remains after change has passed. Days grow longer. The boy learns faster. The gravel dries and glows white in the summer light. Travelers return, bow, and remark on the garden's serenity. None notice the difference, though everything is different. One evening, Ryokai joins Sogen again. They watch the light fade from the pond, the surface shifting with the last ripples of a breeze. The new pattern suits the place, the abbot says. It was not made, Sogen answers. It was found. They sit in silence until the bell sounds from the main hall. The air smells of rain and pine. The first stars emerge, reflected in the pond's surface. Sogen closes his eyes and breathes. The quiet is not empty now, but full of loss, of patience, of all that has passed through his hands and gone beyond his keeping. For the first time in years, he feels no need to perfect anything. He rakes the gravel the next morning not to restore what was lost, but to honor what remains. Each stroke leaves a mark that is already fading, and he understands at last that this too is a kind of prayer. He thinks of his younger self, the soldier, the restless monk, the servant of duty, and smiles faintly. Even he would not have believed that peace could be found in the slow rebuilding of ruined patterns. As the sun climbs over the hills, light touches the temple roof, and the mist begins to lift. The boy Ryo watches from the veranda, his rake resting at his side. "Master," he says, "will we ever finish?" Sogen does not look up from his work. When the wind stops, he answers, and the sound of the rake continues, a quiet rhythm that blends with the world, patient and unending. Autumn comes softly, carried on the breath of the sea. The air smells faintly of salt and smoke, and the hills around Kamakura shimmer in slow waves of red and gold. The monks sweep the temple paths each morning, gathering fallen leaves into piles that rustle like whispers when the wind passes. Sogen, his back more bent now than before, works slower but with a calm that seems carved into him, like the grain of the wood in the temple's beams. He no longer keeps track of the years. The bell rings, the rains fall, the seasons fold into one another like the pages of an unread book. To outsiders, nothing in Engakuji changes. The same gravel, the same pond, the same slow gestures of monks tending what others might call nothing. Yet within the stillness, the world keeps shifting. The moss grows richer where footsteps avoid it. The stones settle deeper into the earth. The silence thickens. Sogen begins his mornings not with work, but with watching. He sits on the veranda before dawn and lets the mist drift through the cedars. Sometimes he hears the faint cry of a deer in the forest, or the sound of a bamboo stalk splitting under its own growth. These too are his teachers now, the sounds of impermanence, quiet and inevitable. The boy Ryo has grown into a young monk, tall and solemn. His movements mirror Sogen's, though more precise, more deliberate, as if trying to capture perfection through imitation. Sogen corrects him less often now. The boy's raked lines are even, the gravel smooth, the patterns clear. One morning, Ryo finishes early and waits, proud for his teacher's approval. Sogen studies the pattern for a long moment, then shakes his head gently. "Too certain," he says. Ryo blinks. "Too certain." "The garden must breathe," Sogen says. "You've closed it." The young monk frowns, but he understands enough to take the rake again. He drags its teeth across the gravel, breaking the perfect lines just slightly. The new pattern shimmers under the light, alive again. That evening, Sogen returns alone to the garden. He walks slowly, his knees stiff, his breath shallow. He sits by the pond, where the moon's reflection trembles with each ripple. He remembers his first years here, the long mornings of labor, the sense of striving, of trying to shape beauty through control. He smiles at the memory of his own impatience. He realizes now that the garden was never something to be made. It was always waiting to reveal itself, the way a mirror shows a face only when one stops moving. His role was never to impose order, but to listen, to become quiet enough that the earth could speak through him. He looks up at the moon and feels no separation between himself and the light, between the gravel and the air. For the first time, the silence feels like completion. Winter returns. The pond freezes at the edges, and frost gathers on the moss. Sogen's body weakens, his hands tremble when he lifts the rake. The younger monks offer to take over his duties, but he refuses gently each time. "While I breathe," he says, "the garden breathes through me." One morning, Ryo finds him sitting by the pond, unmoving but upright, the rake resting across his knees. His eyes are half open, fixed on the reflection of the bare branches above. When the young monk touches his shoulder, Sogen's body leans slightly, and the rake slides soundlessly to the ground. He has passed without struggle, as if he had simply exhaled for the last time. The abbot orders no special ceremony. Sogen's robe is folded neatly, his ashes placed in a small urn beneath the maple tree at the edge of the garden. A stone is set beside it, unmarked. The monks continue their work as before. The rake still traces its lines, the moss still deepens in color, the bell still tolls through the mist. Only Ryo notices the subtle difference. The garden feels lighter, as if something unseen has been released. Days later, he finds a small notebook among Sogen's few possessions. The pages are thin, filled with short lines written in the monk's calm, deliberate hand. No teachings, no instructions, only quiet observations collected over years of tending. Rain is the earth remembering itself. Every mark is a question. Peace is not found in stillness, but in the space between movements. To listen without wanting is to hear the whole world. Ryo closes the book and places it beside the stone under the maple. That night, he dreams of his teacher standing in the garden, smiling faintly, the rake moving in circles that seem endless. Spring returns. The temple fills again with pilgrims. The air smells of plum blossoms, and the sea breeze carries the faint cries of gulls. Ryo stands in the garden at dawn, rake in hand. The gravel is smooth, untouched from the night's rain. He hesitates before making the first stroke, then begins, slow, steady, leaving just enough imperfection for the light to settle. The bell tolls in the distance. The patterns emerge, then disappear with the wind. He feels the garden breathe. When he finishes, he sets the rake aside and bows deeply to the earth. The sun rises over the hills, spilling gold across the stones. The mist lifts. In that moment, he understands what Sogen meant by too certain. Life itself is the garden, never finished, never flawless, always vanishing into the next breath. The monks gather for morning prayer. Ryo lingers one last time on the veranda, watching the patterns shimmer in the light. He whispers quietly, "Thank you, Master," and turns toward the hall. Behind him, a small gust of wind passes through the garden, soft and fleeting. The gravel shifts, the pond ripples, the world exhales. No one sees it, but in the quiet movement of dust and air, Sogen's final lesson endures, that peace is not the absence of change, but the grace of changing without fear. And so the garden continues, year after year, tended by many hands, watched by countless eyes, each believing they see it as it is, though it is never the same twice. Only the stones remember the weight of the rake, the rhythm of a man who found eternity in small, unhurried gestures. And in the hush between one bell and the next, if you listen closely, you can still hear the faint sound of gravel being drawn into circles. A quiet voice that says, without words, that nothing is lost. The streets of Kyoto breathe differently after sundown. The day's merchants fold away their awnings. The sound of the shamisen drifts faintly from the tea houses of Gion, and the air thickens with the smell of wet paper, sake, and smoke. In the narrow lanes between wooden houses, small orange lights bloom one by one, paper lanterns, trembling with the slightest movement of air. Each one has passed through the hands of the same man. His name is Ichiro, and his workshop stands near the Kiyamachi Canal, where the water glows faintly from the lantern's reflections. He is not famous, though his work is everywhere, in shrines, inns, shops, and homes, glowing quietly above the heads of strangers who will never know his name. He is 58 years old, with hands stained by soot and wax, his back bent from years of leaning over the low table where light and patience meet. To the world, he is a craftsman among thousands. To himself, he is a servant of light, a man who builds a vessel for something that cannot be held. He begins his work each morning before the city wakes. The smell of glue, bamboo, and oil fills the small room. He moves with the grace of habit, cutting thin strips of bamboo, bending them over heat to form circular ribs, gluing rice paper with careful precision. Each motion has its own sound: the faint rip of paper, the soft brush of paste, the rhythmic exhale as he smooths the seams. He has been doing this since he was 12, apprenticed to his father, who was apprenticed to his own father. In 3 generations, nothing in the method has changed, only the city around it. Once, the demand came from temples and daimyo houses. Now it comes from tea houses and merchants, who prefer brighter colors and quicker work. Ichiro still makes the old kind, the ones that glow like breath in the dark, their paper thin enough to hum with the warmth of a single flame. He lives alone now. His wife Aki passed 5 winters ago. Their only son left for Osaka, chasing the new industry of gas lamps. Ichiro does not begrudge him. The boy's world is one of metal and light too strong for paper to contain. But at night, when he finishes his work, he sometimes walks to the river and watches the glow of gas lights across the water. A new kind of light that hums without flicker. He feels neither envy nor resentment, only a quiet melancholy. Progress, he knows, moves like wind, invisible but inescapable. In the daytime, Kyoto is bright with merchants' chatter, carts rolling over stones, the cries of vendors selling persimmons or fish. But inside Ichiro's workshop, time behaves differently. Hours pass with the rhythm of folding, gluing, drying. The window faces north, so the light is cool and steady, good for working. On the wall hangs an unfinished lantern, its frame bare like a skeleton waiting for its skin. A young apprentice named Hina arrives each morning to help. She is 16, quick with her hands but impatient with the slowness of the craft. "Master Ichiro," she says, one day, "why must the paper be so thin? It tears if you breathe on it." "Because light is gentle," he replies. "If we make the walls strong, it cannot pass through." She frowns but continues gluing. He watches her learn to handle the bamboo, how it bends easily at first, then resists, then yields again if coaxed just right. Bamboo, he tells her, is like people. It breaks if you force it, but if you wait, it remembers how to bend. By afternoon, the room glows softly with unfinished lanterns hanging from the ceiling like sleeping moons. Ichiro moves among them, inspecting for flaws invisible to anyone else. A crease in the paper, a crooked rib, glue too thick or too thin. He believes that imperfection in one lantern spreads like sickness to all the others. When dusk falls, he lights one of the finished lanterns and sets it by the doorway. The flame flickers, then steadies, its glow spilling out into the street. People passing by slow their steps to look. Some bow slightly, though they do not know why. The light feels familiar, like something remembered from childhood, a warmth that belongs to no one. That evening, after Hina leaves, Ichiro prepares the night's batch of paper. He mixes glue from rice starch and water, stirring slowly until it thickens to the right translucence. The smell reminds him of his father's hands, of nights long ago when the two of them worked side by side, talking little, their brushes moving in the same rhythm. The only sound now is the creak of bamboo and the occasional drip from the eaves. The canal outside reflects the stars, though their light looks pale next to the orange lantern glow. He thinks of the gas lamps his son builds in Osaka, bright, constant, untouched by wind. He imagines a city where night is banished entirely, where shadows no longer move. The thought unsettles him. Without darkness, he wonders, how would anyone recognize light? He works until his eyes blur. When he finally extinguishes the lamp, the room falls into a darkness so complete it feels almost solid. He sits in it for a while, breathing, listening to the soft hum of water beyond the walls. In the dark, he feels the outline of everything he's made, hundreds of lanterns sent out into the world, glowing briefly before burning out or being crushed by rain. He does not mourn their fragility, it is their nature to vanish. The next morning, Kyoto wakes in fog. The city's colors dissolve into gray. Ichiro opens the shutters and lets the damp air in. Hina arrives, her hair wet, carrying bundles of paper wrapped in cloth. Together they hang the lanterns from the ceiling beams, the damp making them sway like sea creatures in still water. He asks her to mix the lamp oil while he trims the wicks. She watches carefully as he shows her how to measure the length of a wick by the size of the lantern. Too short, he says, and the flame will die. Too long, and the smoke will stain the paper. Balance is the heart of the craft. By evening, the fog lifts. The streets glow with warm light again, hundreds of small suns rising as shopkeepers light their lanterns. Ichiro steps outside and looks at the reflection of his own lanterns in the canal, perfect circles trembling in the current. He remembers something his wife once said, years ago, when they were first married. We live between what we can hold and what we cannot. He understands it now. The lantern is only half his creation. The other half, the light, belongs to something unseen. That night, Hina returns to the workshop after dark. She carries a broken lantern from a tea house nearby, the paper torn, the ribs bent. They said it was ruined, she says. Should I throw it away? Ichiro studies the wreckage, then shakes his head. No, we mend it. She watches as he kneels, smoothing the torn edges with his fingers. He applies paste along the tier, lays a new strip of paper across it, presses gently, then waits. The repaired seam glows slightly darker when lit, like a scar. See, he says, even broken light can shine. Hina nods, her eyes reflecting the flame. When she leaves, Ichiro remains in the doorway, watching the lantern flicker in the night breeze. He thinks of his son, of his wife, of the countless hands that will carry his light through the streets long after he's gone. He wonders what kind of light the future will bring, brighter, steadier, colder perhaps, and whether anyone will still want the fragile kind that trembles. The wind shifts, and the flame bends but does not die. He smiles faintly. Some lights, he thinks, are meant to move. The night deepens, the canal murmurs, and the lantern's glow dances softly against the walls, a heartbeat of paper and fire, pulsing against the dark. And as he closes the door, Ichiro murmurs to the empty room, "The light never belonged to us. We only give it shape." Section 2. Winter arrives like an old man settling into a chair, slowly, creakingly, and with the weight of memory. The wind that comes down from the mountains carries the smell of snow and cold iron, and the nights in Kyoto grow long. Lantern light becomes not just decoration, but necessity. Every doorway holds one, every shrine flickers with them, every alley glows faintly like a vein of gold winding through the city's dark. In Ichiro's workshop, the air is sharp with cold. The glue thickens too quickly now, and his fingers stiffen around the brush. He warms his hands by the brazier before returning to the table, where bamboo ribs and paper wait. The craft has become slower in the cold months, but more careful, every line deliberate, every silence meaningful. Hina works across from him, her breath clouding faintly as she hums a tune she learned from street performers. She has grown steadier under his guidance, though her youth still shows in her impatience. "Master," she says, one afternoon, "do you ever tire of making the same thing?" Ichiro pauses, holding a frame in his hand. "The lanterns are never the same," he says. "Only the steps to make them are." She tilts her head. "Then what changes?" He looks at the paper stretched over bamboo, thin, trembling, alive in its fragility. "The light," he says. The light is never the same twice. She doesn't answer, but later, when she lights the finished lanterns, she notices how each flame flickers differently, some quick and playful, others steady and quiet, like a heartbeat asleep. As snow begins to fall outside, Ichiro lights a lantern by the window. The glow spreads softly across the frosted glass, turning the workshop into a cocoon of amber warmth. He remembers when his wife used to sit there, sewing or mending clothes by that same light. Her voice was always low, her laughter quiet. Light, she once told him, is the only thing that touches everything without owning it. He repeats those words now without realizing it. Hina looks up from her work, curious, but does not ask what he means. Some teachings are best learned in silence. In the city, the season of festivals approaches. Kyoto's temples prepare their New Year's lanterns, hundreds of them, painted with calligraphy and sealed with prayers. Ichiro receives more orders than he can fulfill, though the money hardly matters. What drives him is the thought that for one night each year, the entire city will be lit by what his hands have shaped. He works long hours through the cold, sleeping little, eating less. Hina scolds him gently, bringing him rice balls wrapped in cloth, insisting that he rest. He smiles, pretending not to hear, but his body betrays him. The tremor in his hands, the cough that lingers, the way his eyes strain against the candlelight. One evening, after a long day of gluing and trimming, Hina finds him sitting quietly at the workbench, his tools laid out but untouched. "Master," she says. He gestures for her to come closer. "Look at this," he says, pointing to a small tear in one of the lanterns. "What do you see?" "A mistake?" she says. "No," he says gently. "It's where the light enters differently." He touches the edge of the tear, tracing it with his fingertip. Imperfection is the breath of things. Without it, we'd live in a world that cannot breathe. Later that night, after Hina leaves, Ichiro sits alone in the dark. The lanterns around him flicker one by one, the flames bending under faint drafts. He imagines the faces of the people who will see them, travelers, children, lovers, all walking beneath their soft light, unaware of who made them. He finds comfort in that anonymity. To create something that outlives the hand that built it is the only kind of permanence he trusts. Days pass. The streets grow busier as the festival draws near. Vendors hang banners, temple bells rehearse their tones, and every corner fills with anticipation. On the morning before the celebration, Ichiro finishes his final lantern. It is larger than the others, meant for the shrine near the canal, a piece commissioned to honor those lost in the fires that swept through the city decades ago. He carries it carefully to the shrine himself. The snow crunches beneath his sandals, the air sharp enough to sting. When he arrives, the monks bow to him, grateful but hurried. They have hundreds of lanterns to hang. He helps them secure his to the gate, stepping back as they light it. The flame takes, then steadies. The paper glows like sunrise. Ichiro watches the light tremble and feels something inside him loosen, as though a knot he didn't know existed has quietly undone itself. That night, Kyoto blazes with light. From the high terrace of Kiyomizu-dera to the narrow lanes of Pontocho, the city glows like a living constellation. The canal reflects a river of fire. Children laugh. Couples walk arm in arm. Monks chant blessings into the cold air. Ichiro and Hina stand outside the workshop, their faces warmed by the glow of dozens of lanterns hanging from the eaves. "Do you ever wish they lasted longer?" she asks. "No," he says softly. "They last exactly as long as they're meant to." The wind rises, carrying the scent of burning oil and pine smoke. A few lanterns flicker out, their flames snuffed by gusts, their paper collapsing into ash. Ichiro watches without sadness. "Light doesn't die," he says. "It just moves." Later, When the festival quiets, the city returns to shadow. The canal reflects only the faintest embers. Hina returns home to her family, and Ichiro remains in the workshop, surrounded by the smell of smoke and glue and wax. He sits before the empty space where the lanterns once hung, feeling both full and hollow. He thinks of his son in Osaka, of the gas lamps that will someday replace all of this, light that never flickers, never breathes, a colder kind of brilliance. He wonders if anyone will remember the trembling warmth of paper and flame. Then quietly, he reaches for his tools again. He does not know how many more he can make, but while he can still lift the brush, he will keep shaping light into form. Outside, the snow begins again, soft and soundless. Through the frost on the window, the faint glow of a single lantern remains, the last one he lit before the night began. Its flame bends, recovers, and burns on. Ichiro leans back and closes his eyes. The room smells of wax and ash. He listens to the snow falling, the fire crackling, the faint sigh of the canal. The light wavers, steadies, wavers again. In that small motion, the breathing of a flame in winter, he finds what he has been chasing all his life, proof that even the smallest light is alive. And when he finally sleeps, the lantern still burns. Section 3. By the time spring returns to Kyoto, the city has begun to change. The new lamps have come, tall iron poles with glass globes, burning gas that does not tremble, does not hum, does not smell of wax or smoke. The merchants call them the lights of progress. The streets are brighter now, but quieter in a strange way, as if the city no longer breathes between flickers. Ichiro stands beneath one for the first time on an early evening in April. The sky above the canal glows blue-gray, the air heavy with the scent of wet stone. The lamp hisses faintly, its light steady and white, casting shadows sharper than any flame could. It illuminates everything but warms nothing. He watches people pass beneath it, curious, awed, some reverent. They point, whisper, marvel. Children stare with wide eyes. For them, this will be the only light they ever know. Ichiro feels a strange mixture of pride and loss, though he cannot name it. Humanity's hunger for light, after all, is what gave him a life, but now that hunger has outgrown hands like his. He returns to his workshop, where the smell of glue and bamboo still lingers, though less often now. Orders have slowed. The tea houses prefer the new lamps that never need tending. The shrines still ask for lanterns during festivals, but even they speak of electric light, with cautious fascination. Someday one priest had told him, the gods themselves will see us clearer than ever. Ichiro stands beneath one for the first time on an early evening in April. The sky above the canal glows blue-gray, the air heavy with the scent of wet stone. The lamp hisses faintly, its light steady and white, casting shadows sharper than any flame could. It illuminates everything but warms nothing. He watches people pass beneath it, curious, awed, some reverent. They point, whisper, marvel. Children stare with wide eyes. For them, this will be the only light they ever know. Ichiro feels a strange mixture of pride and loss, though he cannot name it. Humanity's hunger for light, after all, is what gave him a life. But now that hunger has outgrown hands like his, he returns to his workshop, where the smell of glue and bamboo still lingers, though less often now. Orders have slowed. The tea houses prefer the new lamps that never need tending. The shrines still ask for lanterns during festivals, but even they speak of electric light with cautious fascination. Someday, one priest had told him, the gods themselves will see us clearer than ever. Ichiro laughed politely, but inside he wondered if the gods would recognize a world without shadows. The days pass in a kind of muted grace. Hina still visits, though she now divides her time between his workshop and a small shop of her own, making painted fans for tourists. She brings food, new paper, gossip from the city. Ichiro listens quietly, smiling when she speaks of the future as if it were a lantern waiting to be lit. One afternoon, she brings him a surprise, a lamp made of metal and glass, smaller than the street lamps but built with the same mechanism. "My brother bought it from a trader," she says proudly. "It burns gas, not oil. It doesn't flicker." Ichiro studies it. The light inside is white, pure, unwavering. He nods, not in approval or rejection, but in acknowledgement of inevitability. "It's beautiful," he says, though his voice carries a tremor she does not miss. "Do you think these will replace the lanterns?" she asks. "They already have," he says. "But beauty isn't something that disappears. It changes shape." That night, after she leaves, he sits before the small gas lamp for a long time. Its flame moves so faintly that it seems still. He places one of his paper lanterns beside it and lights it, watching the two side by side, one trembling, one unyielding. The old light seems fragile now, almost human. The new one, eternal but empty. He understands, suddenly, that the two are not enemies. The new light carries the memory of the old. Without the warmth of paper and wax, perhaps no one would have wanted to bring daylight into night. His craft, though fading, is the ancestor of what now replaces it. The thought comforts him. He turns down the gas flame and leaves the paper lantern burning instead. Its glow fills the workshop with the same orange warmth he has known his entire life. Weeks pass. The first rain of the season begins to fall, soft and endless. The sound on the roof reminds him of his wife's voice, quiet, rhythmic, persistent. He spends most days seated by the window, mending old lanterns, though fewer people come to buy them. Sometimes travelers stop by out of nostalgia, requesting one as a gift. He never refuses. To hold the past in your hands, he thinks, is a kind of prayer. Hina visits one morning and finds him pale, his movements slow. "You must rest," she insists. He waves her off. "If I stop," he says, "the light will stop with me." But that evening, as he tries to bend a piece of bamboo, his fingers fail him. The frame slips, the paper tears. He stares at the damage for a long time, then sets it down. His hands, once so sure, are trembling. For the first time, he cannot fix what is broken. The next morning, he lights a lantern and places it by the window. Its flame sways gently in the draft. He sits beside it, watching the paper pulse with light. His breath slows. Outside, children laugh, chasing one another through the street. Somewhere in the distance, the gas lamps hiss to life. As the evening deepens, he thinks of his wife's voice again, of his son in Osaka, of Hina and her steady hands, and of the thousands of lights he has sent into the world. Each one burned, then vanished, leaving behind only the faint memory of warmth on someone's face. That, he thinks, is enough. When Hina returns the next morning, the workshop smells faintly of smoke and oil. The brazier has gone cold. Ichiro is seated by the window, eyes closed, the lantern still glowing beside him. He looks peaceful, as if listening to something only the flame could say. The paper of the lantern is half burned, the frame blackened at the edges, but the light within it continues for a moment longer. Small, trembling, alive. Hina kneels and bows her head. She does not extinguish the flame. She lets it die on its own. Afterward, she keeps the frame, repairing it with her own hands. When the next festival comes, She carries it to the canal and lights it once more. It floats slowly downstream among hundreds of others, each carrying a whisper of light across the dark water. People watch from the bridge, murmuring prayers, throwing coins. The flames drift, bend, and vanish one by one. But for a brief moment, Kyoto looks as it once did, a city breathing in the rhythm of fire and paper. When her lantern finally disappears around the bend, Hina whispers into the night, "Even broken light can shine." The wind stirs, carrying the scent of wax and rain. The canal shimmers. The last of the lanterns fades. And in the dark that follows, the city does not feel empty, only waiting. For light, Ichiro once said, never dies. It simply finds another hand to hold it. At the edge of an old road outside Kyoto, where the pine trees bend low over the ditch and the smell of rain mingles with wood smoke, stands a small tea hut. It is not one of the grand shashitsu designed for lords and poets, nor a place of polished rituals or famous scrolls. It is a modest dwelling, thatched roof, earthen floor, 2 rooms. If you were to pass it without knowing, you might mistake it for a farmer's shed. Inside, a man named Takahara Jisai brews tea for travelers who can afford little more than warmth. He is 63, his beard white, his robe plain, his eyes calm in the way that comes from seeing everything worth seeing and realizing how little of it truly matters. The locals call him the quiet host. He calls himself nothing at all. He was not always a tea man. In his youth, Jisai was an assistant in a merchant's house, dealing in ceramics. His hands learned the shape of bowls and the balance of a good pour long before he ever tasted the art of chanoyu. When his master died, he left the city behind and wandered. Somewhere along that long, slow walk between Kyoto and Nara, he built this hut by a roadside stream and began boiling water for strangers. That was 27 years ago. The hut opens just after sunrise. The first travelers arrive with the mist, farmers carrying baskets, monks on pilgrimage, weary messengers. They crouch beside the fire, rubbing their hands while Jisai fills the kettle. The water comes from the stream behind the hut, drawn with a bamboo scoop. He keeps no cups alike, no tray polished, no scrolls or flowers for display. Only the kettle, the fire, and a low hum from his lips that sounds almost like a prayer but is not. He pours slowly. The steam rises and coils through the rafters. The tea is not ceremonial, not even particularly fine, a coarse leaf, bitter and green, yet no one complains. What they drink is not the tea, but the quiet that holds it. A samurai once asked him, half joking, "Do you know the proper rules of tea, old man?" Jisai smiled and said, "Enough to forget them." In Kyoto's refined circles, chanoyu had long become theater. Men in silk robes debated the placement of scrolls, the angle of ladles, the lineage of teachers. The simplicity that once defined the tea tradition had hardened into etiquette. But here, on this muddy road, Jisai's hut offered another kind of ceremony, one without form, where silence mattered more than sequence. He used no tatami, only rough planks. The tea bowls were mismatched, chipped but clean. The sound of boiling water was the only music. He spoke little, except to ask if the travelers preferred stronger tea or weaker. When they left, he bowed, not as a host to a guest, but as one man to another, equal in dust and fatigue. Sometimes he went days without visitors. Then he would sit by the doorway, watching the stream, his mind as still as the surface of the water. The hut was his monastery, the kettle his bell. One autumn, a young monk from Uji came to the hut. His robe was threadbare, his sandals torn. He watched Jisai's movements closely as the old man brewed tea, the way his hands paused between motions, the way he lifted the ladle without looking. "You practice the way," the monk said. Jisai smiled faintly. "I boil water." The monk pressed. "You must have a teacher." Jisai thought for a long moment, then nodded toward the kettle. "That one." The monk stayed for several days, sleeping near the hearth, helping gather wood and fetch water. On the third morning, as mist rolled down from the hills, he asked, "Why do you serve strangers for so little?" Jisai answered without looking up, "Because tea cools fastest when shared." The monk did not ask again. Each season changed the tea's taste. In spring, the water was soft with snowmelt. In summer, sharper, drawn from shallow flow. In autumn, it carried the flavor of falling leaves. Jisai adjusted nothing, only boiled, poured, served. The world did the rest. He kept a small ledger, though not for accounts. In it, he recorded fragments of conversation, the names of travelers, and small thoughts written in his careful hand. One man drinks to wake another to rest. The tea knows neither. Every guest leaves a shape in the air. I sweep it away each night. Boil water, make tea, forget yourself, and the kettle remembers. In Kyoto, the name Sen no Rikyu was still spoken like scripture. The nobles imitated his rustic simplicity, building huts more expensive than palaces, seeking the perfection of imperfection. Jisai never mentioned him, though sometimes visitors did. "You follow Rikyu's path," they would say. "You honor his spirit." Jisai only smiled. "The path belongs to anyone who walks it," he would reply, and continue pouring. One evening, as the sun sank behind the hills, a merchant in fine robes stopped at the hut. He looked around and frowned at the plainness. No flower arrangement, no incense, no calligraphy. "You serve tea like a farmer," he said. "Better than serving it like a lord," Jisai answered, not unkindly. The merchant laughed. "Then you must be very poor." Jisai nodded. "Sometimes I am rich enough to forget." They drank together in silence. When the merchant left, he bowed lower than before. As years passed, the hut became known among travelers as the place where tea forgets its name. Pilgrims left coins on the ledge. Poets left verses scratched on scraps of paper. Jisai never read them. He preferred not to trap words in walls. The steam from the kettle was enough. In the winter of his 63rd year, snow fell early. The stream froze at its edges, and travelers grew fewer. Each morning, Jisai broke the ice with a stick before drawing water. His hands cracked from cold, but he worked as always, boiling, pouring, waiting. One morning, as he knelt to light the fire, the flame refused to catch. The wood was damp, his breath short. He sat back, listening to the faint hiss of the wet kindling. Through the open door, snow drifted in, settling on the worn floor. He did not move to brush it away. He felt neither sadness nor fear, only the deep, slow quiet that filled the space when everything unnecessary fell away. The kettle sat beside him, empty but waiting. He placed his hand on its lid, as if greeting an old friend. He whispered, "Not yet," and reached again for the flint. The spark caught this time. The fire rose, smoke curling toward the roof. He smiled faintly, poured water, waited for the first bubble to break. When the tea was ready, he poured a single cup and set it on the mat across from him, as if for a guest unseen. The steam rose, fragile and steady. Outside, The snow thickened. The road disappeared. The sound of the kettle was the only movement left in the world. Jisai lifted his cup, took one sip, and exhaled. He looked at the doorway, at the snow, at the grey sky beyond, and thought, even this is enough. The steam drifted upward, vanishing into the roof's dark. The fire cracked once, then settled into a quiet glow. And in that small hut by the frozen stream, tea continued to boil. Simple, unceremonious, eternal. The thaw comes slowly that year. Ice melts from the stream in thin layers, each one breaking apart with a sound like porcelain cracking in slow motion. The first travelers return to the road, merchants from Osaka leading mules, pilgrims bound for the great temples, peasants selling firewood. The world begins to move again, creaking to life after its long stillness. Jisai greets it with his usual calm. His hair has thinned, his hands tremble when he pours, but the kettle still hums, the water still boils, the rhythm endures. He spends his mornings sweeping away the mud left by melting snow, patching the thatch roof with reeds, repairing the cracked clay of the hearth. The tea hut breathes again, not new, not old, but perfectly in between. One afternoon, a boy appears on the path, thin, barefoot, perhaps 12 years old. His kimono is torn, his face streaked with dust. He hesitates at the doorway, as if unsure whether he's entered the world or left it. "Are you selling tea, old man?" he asks. "I'm sharing it," Jisai says. "Selling it would make me think it's worth more than it is." The boy laughs, a sharp sound, almost defiant. "Then it must be free." "Nothing is free," Jisai says, "but not everything needs to be paid for." The boy sits, rubbing his hands together for warmth. Jisai pours tea into a chipped bowl and sets it before him. The boy sips cautiously. "It's bitter." "Then you'll remember it longer," Jisai says. The boy's name is Ren. He's been traveling from the countryside, where floods ruined the fields. He works odd jobs, carrying firewood, cleaning stables, and sleeps in shrines when the monks aren't watching. Jisai offers him a corner of the hut to sleep, in exchange for gathering wood and fetching water. Ren accepts, though reluctantly. They fall into a quiet routine. In the mornings, Ren collects fallen branches and lights the fire. At noon, he sits with Jisai to share tea. In the evenings, he listens to the older man speak of small things, how to read the color of the flame, how to listen for water's voice before it boils. At first, Ren laughs at such talk. "Water doesn't have a voice," he says. "Then why do you know when it's ready?" Jisai asks. Ren doesn't answer. He begins to listen more carefully after that. Weeks pass. The hut fills again with travelers, men and women who leave footprints on the path but not in Jisai's mind. He serves them all the same. A bow, a pour, a silence. Ren learns to do the same. His movements are clumsy at first, but patience grows in him like moss on a stone. One evening, after the last guest leaves, Jisai asks, "Why do you travel, Ren?" The boy shrugs. "To find something better." "And what will you do when you find it?" "Keep walking," he says, without hesitation. Jisai smiles. "Then you are wiser than you think." Ren looks confused. "Why?" "Because most men stop searching when they are lost." That night, as the wind sighs through the trees, Jisai wakes to find the boy sitting by the fire, staring at the kettle. "Can't sleep?" he asks. Ren shakes his head. "It's the sound," he says, "like someone breathing." "It is," Jisai says. "The world." He pours tea for them both. They drink in silence, the fire crackling softly between them. Ren looks at the older man's hands, thin, knotted, veins rising beneath the skin, and asks, "How long have you been doing this?" "Long enough to forget when I started," Jisai says. "Don't you ever get bored?" "Only when I try to be interesting." Ren laughs quietly, unsure if it's a joke. The months unfold gently. Spring becomes summer. The forest deepens in color. The air hums with cicadas. Travelers bring stories of unrest. Tax collectors demanding more. Merchants raising prices. Lords tightening control. But none of it touches the tea hut. Its peace is small and complete, like a single circle drawn in sand. One afternoon, a storm rolls in from the west. The wind slams the shutters. Rain hammers the roof. The kettle rocks on its stand. Jisai sits unmoving, eyes closed, listening to the rhythm of rain. Ren, frightened, tries to hold the door closed against the gusts. "Leave it," Jisai says. "The storm doesn't need your permission." When the wind finally calms, the hut leaks in 3 places. Water pools on the floor. Ren curses softly, grabbing a rag to clean it. Jisai only watches, then says, "No matter how strong the roof, the sky always wins." Ren looks up, frowning. "Then why fix it?" "To keep busy until it happens again." Later, they rebuild the roof together. It takes 2 days of climbing, binding, and patching. Ren learns how to weave reeds without breaking them, how to twist rope just tight enough to hold. When it's done, Jisai pours tea for both of them and says, "You see, the sky allows us to repair what it breaks. That's kindness." Ren laughs. "You call that kindness?" "What else could it be?" The days shorten. The first autumn leaves fall into the stream. The kettle, always humming, seems louder now that the woods are quiet. Jisai's steps slow, and sometimes his breath catches when he bends to lift the pot. Ren begins taking over the heavier work without being told. One evening, they sit outside watching the sunset. The light burns red through the pines. "When I'm gone," Jisai says suddenly, "someone must keep the kettle boiling." Ren turns to him. "Gone where?" "Everywhere," the old man says, smiling. "That's the best direction." Ren looks at the stream, at the endless water sliding by, and feels something in his chest tighten. He doesn't know what to say, so he pours tea instead. They drink together in silence. The steam rises and disappears. The following week, fewer travelers come. The air grows colder. Ren notices how the old man's hands tremble more, how he stares longer into the fire before speaking. He begins to understand that the hut's quiet is not just peace, it is farewell, stretched gently over time. One night, as the moon climbs above the trees, Jisai says, "Do you know the secret of tea?" Ren shakes his head. "It tastes best," the old man says, "when no one tries to own the moment." Ren repeats the words under his breath, as if memorizing them. The kettle whistles softly, then stills. The old man leans back, eyes half closed. "You'll understand one day," he says, "when the steam clears." Outside, the sound of the stream fills the darkness. The fire burns low, the smell of tea and smoke blending in the air. Neither speaks again that night. By morning, frost coats the path. The kettle is cold. Ren kneels beside the hearth and touches it gently. "I'll keep it warm," he whispers. The water outside glints with the first light of dawn. The steam rises again. The world, unchanged, keeps boiling. The frost stayed for days, sharpening the air until every sound seemed to echo. The stream behind the tea hut froze at its edges again, and Wren woke each morning to break the ice before drawing water. The kettle was his first thought when he opened his eyes, his last before he closed them. In that small, humble task, boiling, pouring, waiting, he felt the old man's presence still beside him, as if Jaisy's breath had never left the room. He did not speak of the death. There was no one to tell, and even if there had been, words felt too heavy for something so light. He buried the old man under the pine behind the hut, marking the place with a stone no different from the others scattered nearby. On it, he wrote only one character, cha, tea. It was all that needed saying. For days afterward, he continued as before. Travelers came, sat by the fire, drank in silence, and left. Some asked where the old master had gone, and Wren only replied, "He is resting." They bowed and did not press further. The rhythm of the hut endured. The water still boiled, the steam still curled through the air, the scent of green tea still clung to the walls. Only now, when Wren poured the tea, he felt something unfamiliar, a kind of quiet that wasn't stillness, but continuation. He began to understand that Jaisy had not left anything behind to preserve, he had simply shown how to keep the world turning with grace. One morning, a pair of monks stopped by. They had heard stories of the hut, that the tea served here carried peace to those who drank it. They found only Wren, a boy with ash-stained hands and hair falling into his eyes. "Are you the master?" one asked. Wren almost laughed. "No one is the master," he said. "The kettle does the work. I only pour." The monks exchanged a glance, then smiled. They sat. Wren boiled water, poured, and waited as the steam rose between them. The tea was simple, bitter but clean. One of the monks, older and sharp-eyed, said, "Your teacher understood the way." Wren nodded. He didn't call it that. What did he call it? Wren thought for a long time before answering. Boiling water. The monk chuckled. "A humble name for a deep truth." "Or just the truth," Wren said quietly. When they left, they bowed deeply. The younger monk turned back once and said, "The tea here tastes like silence." After they were gone, Wren sat for a while, staring into the fire. He could still hear the faint hiss of the kettle, the whispering sound it made just before boiling, the sound Jaisy had called the world breathing. That evening, as dusk fell, a cold wind swept through the valley. The door rattled, the flames wavered, and the old roof sighed. Wren looked up at the shelves. The same mismatched cups, the same worn ladle, the same clay kettle blackened by years of fire. Each carried the shape of Jaisy's hands, faint but permanent. He picked up the kettle and examined it. Its lid fit loosely now, the handle slightly cracked. It was far from perfect, but it worked. He placed it back on the fire and whispered, "All things can serve again." As the steam began to rise, he prepared 2 cups instead of 1. When the water boiled, he poured the first cup, then the second, setting it across from him where Jaisy used to sit. He did not speak aloud, but in the soft rhythm of pouring and waiting, he felt something like a conversation. Quiet, wordless, alive. For the first time since the old man's death, he smiled. Over time, word spread again of the tea hut. Travelers spoke of the young keeper who served tea without ceremony, who asked for no payment but silence. Some said the hut was enchanted, that the steam itself carried prayers. Others said the boy was a spirit left behind by his master. Wren paid no attention to such stories. He kept boiling water. Years passed. He grew into a man, his hair dark at first, then streaked with grey. The hut changed little, except in the way the light fell through its thatch. The world beyond changed more. New roads, new rulers, new tea houses built in the cities where gold was poured more eagerly than water. But those who traveled the old road still found this small place, still sat by its fire, still left with quiet in their eyes. Sometimes a scholar would ask about the meaning of his way. They would quote lines from Recu or Basho, hoping to impress him. Ren would listen patiently and then say, "Meaning isn't something you can drink." Other times peasants stopped by, too poor to offer even a coin. He served them the same tea he gave to samurai and poets. When they apologized for having nothing to give, he answered, "You brought thirst. That's enough." In time, Ren stopped keeping count of seasons. The forest grew thicker around the hut, the stream narrower, the road quieter. He lived mostly on rice and tea, his body thin but his spirit content. When storms came, he sat inside, watching the rain blur the edges of the world. One winter, many years later, a young woman arrived at the hut, carrying a child on her back. She looked exhausted, her sandals torn, her hands red from cold. Ren gave her tea without question. The child woke and began to cry softly. The woman hushed him, whispering thanks. She looked around the hut and said, "My grandmother spoke of this place. She said there was once a man who served tea that could heal the heart." Ren smiled faintly. Then she drank it while it was still hot. The woman laughed quietly, the sound brittle with weariness. "Is it true," she asked, "that your teacher boiled water every day for 50 years? Ren nodded. He stopped only when the kettle stopped. She thought about this, her gaze softening. "And you?" Ren poured another cup and watched the steam rise between them. "I'll stop when the water forgets how to boil." They sat together in silence as snow began to fall outside. The world narrowed to the sound of the kettle, the warmth of the cups in their hands, the brief meeting of strangers made gentle by heat and time. When they left the next morning, the woman bowed deeply. Ren watched her walk down the road until she disappeared into the mist. Then he turned back to the hut, the same as always, yet somehow new again. He realized then that the hut had never truly belonged to him or to Jaisi. It belonged to anyone who needed it. He was only the keeper of the kettle, the caretaker of an endless moment. That evening, as the last light faded from the sky, he poured a final cup for the day and set it across from him, the way he always did. He watched the steam rise, curl, and vanish, and whispered, "It's your turn again, master." The kettle hissed softly, as if answering. Outside, the world continued, snow falling, streams running, travelers walking, each one carrying a little warmth from a cup that had been poured without ceremony. And in the hut, the fire glowed. The steam drifted upward, tracing invisible prayers. The water boiled, as it always had. And peace plain,